Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Welcome to another episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all so much for joining us here I think I'm in Wisconsin still. So we want to apologize because I'm still in Wisconsin. Hannah's still on leave, but he is making a promise that he'll have his studio up here in the next couple of weeks. So hopefully we have that to look forward to. With that being said, let me bring on my co-host for the evening, Boyce from Mindful Skeptics Podcast, as well as new Cellar Door Skeptics host, Buddy the Lumberjack. How are you all doing tonight?
I'm doing all right, boy.
I didn't think he was actually going to do it. But he did it.
I don't think you can make it for a full episode, boy, but we'll see. We'll see.
I'll do my damnedest, I promise.
Anyway,
He
thank you all.
already, that boy ain't right.
Thank you all for joining us. We have some interesting topics today. As we had Halloween the week before, I wanted to do a special Halloween segment straight from Canada. And we have a couple of other things. Tucker Carlson had a very interesting news segment last week that I wanted to kind of talk about. And, of course, we aren't going to be able to not address the founders' racism termination suit and wrongful termination suit that are being filed against Founders Brewery, which is a local Grand Rapids / Holland brewery that has now seen the light in national news. So, can't pass that one. So, anybody have anything exciting that happened to them this week? Boys, tell us a little bit about what your show was.
Well, I had on a congressman from California who's running on UBI on yesterday, and I'll be putting that out tomorrow. And I'm heading to. I went to the UBI march in Chicago this weekend too, and live streamed that. It was cold as balls and raining, but I was there.
I can imagine. It was very cold this weekend, so I can only imagine being stuck in Chicago that way.
I think it was like 37 and windy and rainy.
Hey, it sounds like Chicago.
Sounds like the Midwest.
Yeah.
You know, I hear you say it was 37, and I go, my God, that's so warm. And then I have to remember, oh, yeah, you guys do like this weird bald eagle measurement thing. So,
What's a bald eagle measurement?
I don't know. It's what you guys measure things in.
With bald eagles?
I don't know the states. You guys are weird. Everywhere else runs on Celsius. You guys are the standouts.
Oh, okay. Okay, so fine. It was 7 degrees Celsius. Does that make you feel better?
I mean, yes, it does. But that is not 37. It was more like 2 or 3 degrees Celsius.
Yes.
And there's a big difference, and I know that.
It was definitely 2 degrees Celsius then.
It's bitching cold.
Anyway, so we could talk all day long about Celsius versus Fahrenheit, but I don't think that's a very fair description of what our show should be. So, without further ado, I thought what we would do is let's start talking about the segment I had on Tucker Carlson. So if you don't know who Tucker Carlson is, he is a Fox News host. And yes, don't be shocked if you didn't know, I watch both sides of the thing. And it's kind of funny because I don't remember which one of you it was, but somebody was making fun of me in pre-show saying, I can't believe you watch Fox News.
That was me.
But I do. And I'll rationalize it like this, saying if we can't at least understand what the other side is spewing, how are we able to counteract it? And how do we know if maybe we're a little bit off base? And it's kind of funny because I'll watch CNN sometimes, but not very often. I read all the articles, do all those other things, you know, while you're doing your natural business, you know, before work and stuff like that. And while you're, you know, at home cooking dinner or whatever.
I got it.
There you go. Yeah. And so there's just some things that when I spend my time reading stories, but I was in the hotel room just doing nothing. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to throw Fox News on for a couple hours and see what comes of it. Well, Tucker Carlson came on, and the bottom of his headline for the show I was watching was, "Socialism is ruining America." And I'm sitting there going, okay, this is nothing new, right? I don't think that he understands what socialism is. And he starts going into this discussion about student loan debt. And he throws out this proposal, dead serious. He throws out a proposal that says, well, instead of just forgiving all student loan debt and making all colleges free, you know where we should start? We should go after the colleges and say, hey, we're going to take all of that money you've been making off of students, all the millions and millions of dollars, and you're going to clean up student debt.
I think that kind of misses a huge problem, though, and weren't American student loans also like privatized and sold off, and now they're just marked up for interest rates, basically? So it's a private company doing it, not actually the federal government running it.
Yeah.
So isn't that part of the problem?
Yes, I don't disagree with you. Yes, that is part of the problem. But these large government endowment funds are also part of the problem, right? When we have all of these endowment funds, and I'm sorry, they're not government endowment funds. They're privately held endowment funds. So we have people becoming multimillionaires off student loan debt and selling student loan debt.
Yep.
And so it's not just this government thing where the government is essentially, ruining everything, right? It's also because of the fact that they have the specific debt that is being held, and people are making interest money, and it's essentially like having a private collective bank for yourself.
Well, and also they're protected, like Joe Biden specifically lobbied to make sure that they could not get away from that debt with the bankruptcy clause.
Wow, yeah, that's great.
He wants to be president.
And I'm sure, I'll be honest, I'm sure that's part of what the dig is, because he ended up having a more progressive individual on the show. And that progressive individual, he started challenging him. He's like, well, you're from Harvard and you want socialism and all these other things. And he's like, well, I do agree with socialism, and I think that would be a better route for our country. He's like, but I agree with you. We should at least compromise to begin with, and let's start attacking some of these endowment funds. Let's start going after the actual establishment that's raising large quantities of money and making, millions and millions of dollars off the backs of students. And Tucker goes, well, I don't think your buddies over at Harvard where you graduated are going to be very happy by this. And he's like, no, I'm sure they won't be. And he's like, but I don't care. And I agree with you, Tucker. Like, if this is what it takes to cross the aisle,
wow,
let's cross the aisle. And I'm sitting here about having a heart attack because I'm sitting here going, isn't this Tucker Carlson? I mean, now, in fairness, every other word he was trying to basically use derogatory words about socialism and Democrats, and he's trying to turn this into a Republican stance, which is the funniest thing ever. But he goes, the next president of the United States, if they support this, and they specifically support this, they can easily become the next president. And the guy goes, well, you kind of sound like Elizabeth Warren now. And he goes, I sound like older portions of Elizabeth Warren. Absolutely. And I don't disagree with everything Elizabeth Warren says. He's literally on TV spewing this. Like, and I'm sitting here going, is this Fox News or is this like conservative CNN all of a sudden?
I'm
sorry. Resignation episode.
That sounds very unlike the Tucker Carlson that I've grown familiar with, because there was that video that I showed you earlier where he got called out for by what the hell's the guy's name, who Tucker Carlson had brought him on because he went to this billionaires meeting and basically sat there and was like, you guys are only talking about philanthropy, when why not talk about, I don't know, your tax shelters and the fact that you guys don't pay your fair share of taxes, which is contributing to so many of the problems. And then the guy pointed out that Carlson works for Fox News, who is funded by the Cato Institute, which I believe he said was funded by the Koch brothers. And he ended it by saying, like, you're a millionaire who's paid for by billionaires. Like, you're right. Part of the problem too. Mm-hmm. And Carlson actually had the audacity to say that there was a problem with the interview and that it wasn't interesting enough. But the guy was smart enough that he recorded it himself. And Tucker Carlson just lost his mind on this guy. Like, at first he's chumming it up. He goes, oh, you've had the balls to say what, we've said on this show, but you actually went there and we've never been there and you said it there. And oh, that's so great. And then the guy started laughing and being like, yeah, but you're like on their side pretty much for every other thing that's gone on. Like, you always agree with them. You're part of the problem too. And then Tucker Carlson, of course, went into his whole, well, fuck you, and you're stupid, and you're a moron, and you're boring, and blah, 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 because Uncle Tucker Carlson can't be normal. But that's so out of character, because that's Tucker Carlson that I know.
No, and I would agree with
this broken clock that's right once a day.
Yeah, I would agree with you, actually. I would agree 100% saying that's the normal Tucker Carlson I knew. And, like, you know, and that's what I wanted to have, you know, a short discussion on this, because specifically to me, you know, we talk about crossing that aisle, right? We talk about, you know, moving into how do we merge paths? And, you know, again, I had a friend that voted for Trump, you know, doesn't regret it, still loves Trump, and now puts out pro-Trump videos and blah, 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 blah. But, you know, for the longest time, he's a libertarian. He believed in, you know, in understanding and being able to have the free speech and the ability to, you know, have less government. Now, here he is supporting Trump. But one of his big arguments that he always had was, how do we cross that aisle? Why, Chris, can you and I talk, but 90% of the nation can't talk to each other? Why does it always have to be this big war? And tonight, that's what this episode reminded me of. They crossed paths. You want to know the other thing Tucker Carlson said?
I'm sitting down, so you can tell me now.
Yeah, all right, and because this actually relates all the way back to Andrew Yang, right? You know, and before the show, we talked a little bit about Andrew Yang and some of the recent statements he made. But one of the big things Andrew Yang's about, right, is the UBI. And so they got into, you know, talking about, somehow they moved the topic and they got into talking about, you know, wages. And Tucker Carlson admits that people are not making enough in the middle class, and that back in the 50s and the 40s, people were able to live on one income households. And I'm sitting here going, oh my God, this is the same. I say the exact same thing every day. You know, like, this is nothing new. And then all of a sudden he goes, you know, the guy goes, well, you know, I would be in support of UBI for, you know, stay-at-home mothers. And Tucker Carlson agreed. He agreed to this. Like, I mean, I heard a guy that thinks socialism's ruining everything just agree to a semi-socialist, you know, belief set. I didn't even know what to say. I literally wish I could have recorded this. I wish it was on my computer and not on the TV, so I could have recorded this whole thing, because I don't know. I don't want to be this excited about it, you know, Tucker Carlson, but if conservatives are finally starting to understand some of these things, I think as a progressive, we have a lot better of a shot at some of it.
Absolutely. But that's one thing that I've noticed is growing up around conservatives, and I don't want to go too deep into it. Long story short, old coworker got like hardcore into Shapiro, and just to kind of deal with some of the things he was throwing at me. And I was like, I've never actually watched Shapiro. I made the mistake, and I don't recommend ever watching anything of Shapiro, because your YouTube metrics will be ruined for months. And like, one of the things that I kept seeing was that he would be like, yeah, no, I totally agree that we should like throw rapists into jail, they should be castrated, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to go that extreme, but I'm glad we're on the same page. And when it comes to like general values, I find that left and right tend to have similar stances. The problem starts to break down is once you start getting into the nuances. And on the big thing that I've noticed, that on the right, there tends to be this black or white response to specific buzz terms. And I mean, you see it on the left too, but on the left, I have seen more of a nuanced discussion that kind of breaks down and tries to take a further step back. Whereas on the right, you kind of look for like simple, folksy gotcha points and seemingly simple wisdom that, you know, they try to tout as common sense. And that's where I think the discussion tends to break down, is just like, you think that the other person has the wrong approach to the problem, and they're approaching your values the wrong way. That's just like a simple observation that I've made anyways. And I am glad that you brought this up, because sometimes, you know, we do agree on things with, you know, people like Tucker Carlson, who we tend to just kind of lump into racist, bigoted, wealthy tirades, who hate socialism because socialism is just a bad word. But once it gets down into like the talk about values, that's where we find the common ground.
Well, and I think that's why you'd redefine the center. The center is way too far right. Mm-hmm. And I think Andrew Yang has found a niche with Tucker Carlson types that are trying to be reasonable. He's been on Tucker Carlson's show 3 times, and all 3 times he's agreed with them. Like, Tucker's like, that does make sense. And then I'm just like, what the fuck? Wow. You know, like, it caught me off guard. He actually agreed with him. And a couple times on Fox, like Bernie and Andrew Yang's the only candidates went on Fox right now for like a town hall Q&A thing. I don't know if you guys seen what Bernie did.
Yes. Yep.
We
I've
went on
watched
there,
that.
and they were shocked that all the people in the crowd said they'd give up their private insurance for Medicare for all. And they're like, "Oh, really?" And they changed that subject so quick. They didn't want Bernie being right about nothing.
Yeah.
They changed it quick.
Well, and some of the question becomes is, do we just need to change terminology that we have? You know, like, and again, you know, I'm still not going to back down on we need to punch not. Just I don't think I can back down on that. But you know,
we all have to have lines in the sand that we cannot cross. I get it. I'm on the same side as you, Tanner. I get it.
You know, yeah, and same with like the show BoJack Horseman. It's the most awesome show. I'm glad we're on the same page as that. But
them's fighting words.
But the best part about that is okay, so maybe let's be more intelligent about our discussions. And I'm not saying we should give up the rhetoric. I'm not saying we should give up, you know, the passion we have. I'm not saying that we should cross that aisle to an extreme stance. But I'll tell you what, if Andrew Yang is able to cross that aisle, and it means, again, and I had this conversation about Hillary. You know, I don't think Andrew Yang's as conservative as Hillary personally, because he checks more boxes of mine than Hillary did. You know, I mean, Andrew Yang's not a war supporter, for Christ's sake. So
not saying much either.
But you know what I'm saying is, here we are in a situation where I voted for Hillary very, very easily. I'll vote for Biden if I absolutely have to. But if Yang is the answer, if Bernie and Elizabeth Warren are just the pariahs, and Yang's the answer, and he's speaking 80 to 90% the same thing Bernie is and Elizabeth Warren is, and it means the conservatives are going to buy into it because there's a little racism there or a little sexism there where they don't want a woman president and they don't want an old, you know, white guy that's yelled at them about socialism. Fine. I'm okay with this, I guess. You know, I guess that's what I'm saying is I'm okay. And Andrew Yang's, you know, like somewhat experienced. So, you know, I mean, we're at the point where if that's what it takes for us to get into the next, you know, the next step, if that's what it takes for us to get rid of Trump and to get UBI and to get a step towards actual socialized health care.
Yeah, Medicare for all.
I don't know what else. I don't know what else to say. Right? I don't know how else to say that has to be the end.
Well, that's the thing too. I focused on now is what's the difference between the top candidates, you know. And so for Elizabeth Warren and Bernie, there's a few differences, but they have a lot of similarities. So their differences are very nuanced. They both, you know, single payer universal health care, and they both want a wealth tax to pay for it, and they both want to wipe out all student debt, and a few different things that are very similar. And their differences are very minute. So it's really about identity, I guess, and track record, because Elizabeth Warren is very vulnerable to Trump as far as I'm concerned. Like, as far as electability, she'll fall for the same traps, like him with the DNA shit. And but whoops, is that mine? Did I make that? You guys hear it? My bad.
Yeah. Anyway, but you're right. So it's like, you're right. Yeah, that's the thing is, maybe she will. You know, I don't know if that's what would lose an election, and I think it's sad that we get down to that extent. I mean, for Christ's sake, look at Canada. I mean, they got one guy with brown face, and they got another guy that is a completely awful candidate that never should have been running to begin with, and they're coming neck and neck. And it's like, well, you know, that's the best of what Canada has to offer, but they're not considering some of the downfalls. They're considering platform, right? And a lot of people just don't support Justin Trudeau's platform. You know, I mean, especially now that Trump's in office, right? People don't have to side with the progressive candidate anymore. They can feel comfortable being bullies and being out there saying, hey, I've got an alternative wing condition, I guess is the nicest way to say it, that, my privilege is being eroded, all that garbage that we hear from the Trump support. But
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought it was interesting, though.
Well, that's the thing. I think that the only difference between Andrew Yang and Bernie's policies are that Andrew Yang says UBI, Bernie says free federal jobs guarantee, and then what? And then Bernie says the same thing about, like, he wants to pay off college debt, and Andrew Yang says that only helps 40% of the people. And then when it comes to Medicare for all, you know, Bernie says single payer health care right out the gate, but it takes 4 years. And Andrew Yang says just a public option, and the market will push it towards single payer because we'll outcompete them. They want the same thing in the end. There's a different way of getting there.
Yeah. And is it okay if we try the other way if it gets us 80% of the rest of what we want?
Yeah, here's
I mean,
my
you
thing. If I'm okay 100% with Bernie, if I'm okay 100% with Bernie, I mean, flat out, Andrew Yang drops out, Bernie, I got you. Like there's no doubt about that. I had him in 16. I just don't agree with the federal jobs guarantee. It's the only thing I really have a problem with. But
Yeah.
the other 95%, I'm good with. So that's what we got to come to that point. Like, okay, we cannot be this tribalistic within the Democratic Party either. So
Absolutely. Because once we start like going into, as you were saying, tribalism there, that's a big part of the issues. Then people start dogmatically following a specific person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we get the Bernie or bust bros who just, if I don't get my way, I'm going to burn down the house, instead of, well, if I don't get my way, what's the next best thing?
Mm-hmm.
And following down the line after that.
Yeah. It's just not Trump. That's all I got to say. I'll vote for goddamn pile of steaming crap before I vote for him.
Well, wouldn't that be the same thing? I mean, I guess the steaming pile of crap wouldn't be wasting millions of dollars golfing, and wouldn't be just the biggest douchebag.
It wouldn't change the laws, put children in cages and refuse people from the Middle East, and at least
unless they're Christian, because that was his stance.
Doing nothing's better than what he's doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we get somebody that will do something other than. But I don't know. Like I said, I wanted to talk through this only because I think, especially on this show, we've rallied very, very, very hard against Trump and Trump supporters, against a lot of the GOP. And I'll be honest, when's the last time many of us probably voted GOP in this room?
I voted for Bush the first time. I hated John Kerry. Wait, was that John Kerry the first time or second time?
Second
no,
time.
The first time it was.
I voted against John
Gore.
Kerry. Let's put it.
Al Gore was the first one.
Second time, yeah.
Which is funny because instead of me voting against John Kerry, I voted Green Party. So,
haha.
I was Ralph Nader all the way.
I voted for Ralph Nader. I hate everyone.
And Ross Perot, goddammit.
No, not Ross Perot.
That was before that.
Yeah, the only criticism that I have, and Tanner, I know you want to move on, so I just want to drop this one little criticism here, is I was just going over the Slate article, and it's just in Tucker's monologue there. He would use things like they don't understand our problems, so basically trying to separate himself from the ruling class, which, as I was saying earlier, is kind of bullshit. He's just trying to identify with everyday Joe, and that just kind of has my skeptical heckles raised. Is that the term? Heckles? I don't know.
Yeah.
Either way, my skeptic senses are tingling.
Yeah. I will agree with you, but at the same time, I have to disagree with you a little bit. And I only say this because
that's cool.
He could technically take less money, right? But he's being paid whether he feels it's a fair wage or not. He's being paid a specific amount of money, for his job.
Yeah. $6 million a year.
Yeah. Oh, that's it. Hey.
Yeah, but he's being paid this amount of money, right? And the difference is if that's what his job dictates. In capitalism, we just say, okay, whatever. And I disagree with what he's being paid 100%, all across the board, no questions asked. The difference, though, and again, the difference here is the reason he does that is to say, hey, my message is for them. And the difference would be the next step for him would be to say, and this is where you're saying, hey, he's not doing it. And maybe he's changed, but I doubt it. You never know. His next step would be to say, okay, hold on a second. You're right. I'm in this 1%. I need to get out of this 1%. And I need to help figure out how I'm going to help do that, which is what Bernie is doing. Now, maybe secretly he's doing that, right, by supporting UBI for stay-at-home mom, by supporting forgiving student loan debt. Maybe he is doing that in his weird, fucked up, I guess is the nicest way to put it, way. Know about that. And I don't know, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. I do, like I said, I do disagree just a tiny bit in the aspect of we have to allow for the fact that if he is a front face and he is a millionaire, we can judge him for that. But at the exact same time, we have to accept the fact that if his ultimate goal is to give a similar message as to what we're giving, we should not throw a bunch of shade on that. That's why I just said that's why I just said my skeptical senses were just a little aware of that particular thing. Is just
you know, we're the cellar door skeptics, Tanner. That's the title of the show, is that we have to be skeptical, and we have to be willing to think. Now, yeah, like I agree with you. If he's sharing that, if that's where he's going, then awesome. That's great. Like, welcome to the table, bud. We're happy to have you. I mean, you clearly know how to market yourself well enough if you can get yourself into a position, but like, it's just a matter of where do his true intentions lie. And I mean, without really knowing him personally, it's very difficult to parse that. So it's just important to kind of be aware, right?
No, I would agree.
Like if your job is to make somebody like you, how trustworthy are you, right? Like, that's why I don't trust most politicians, is because their job is literally to make you like them.
Yeah.
Well, I like you, Keith. Does that mean that you're a politician?
No, that just means that we're endearing.
Oh, is that a Canadian word? Just...
Motherfucker.
Oh, anyway, speaking of Canadian words and Canadian discussions, given the nature of Halloween, Buddy had a special article that he wanted to review. Now, when you sent this to me, it says the National Post, and the first thing I think of, literally, the first thing I thought of was, is this like some weird tabloid thing that you've been watching? Are you watching like or reading tabloid news, and like you're going to share tabloid news and on the show?
No. The National Post, I mean, I've never fully committed to reading it. It is a news outlet in Canada. I believe it's got more of a leftward bend. But I'm not 100% sure. It's just I followed this article because I wanted to keep with the spirit of Halloween, because I love Halloween. I love getting spooky, and I love horror stories, and I drive my wife nuts because I love watching all those scary things, and they are not her thing. So this is giving me an outlet and sparing her. I'm getting the eyes right now. Sorry, my wife is also in the room, and she just kind of gave me the fuck out of here eyes and noise.
Anyway.
So this article, now there's 13 specific spooky parts of Canadian history, or 13 spooky places, events, things, whatever. I only focus on a couple of them just for time's sake, the more interesting ones. So the first one is, I thought this was actually one of the more interesting of the articles, and I should have saved it for last, but oh well. So this first one here, you can follow this article along at home if you read it, if you want. It's called The Arctic Zombies. Now, I'm just going to try to sum this up. Essentially, what this phenomena was the Inuit people who live amongst the tundra, the Arctic Circle, and all of that. They're very typically isolated people, which is basically made it so they don't see, they never really had a lot of exposure to outside cultures, so they very much had a chance to focus on themselves. So in 1850, there were a small group of Inuit people who were camped at the southern end of the King William Island. And they were like one of the most isolated people. Like, they'd never even met white people before. Lucky them,
wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And they had actually barely even encountered other Inuit peoples. So you can imagine their horror when all of a sudden, outside of their igloos, because they lived in igloos, they started to hear footsteps. And what they found was a crowd of vacant-eyed, blue-skinned, incoherent, barely living people. Now, these were actually the last remnants of the ill-fated Franklin expedition. It was an 1845 British voyage of the Arctic exploration, and that ended with the death of everyone on board. So as, the bands of people who were, trying to survive, they split up, they trudged south in an attempt to, flee the Arctic on foot. The Inuit throughout the region kind of faced almost like a real-life invasion of the Walking Dead. They would see men, raving wildly.
I would have think it would be more like the White Walk. That's how I saw it. Or maybe if you wanted to get real creative, like that movie Dead Snow. Has anybody ever
Nazi
seen Dead
zombies?
Snow? Yes. Like maybe it's a little bit more like that, like dead-eyed, walking, blue skin. I don't know.
Only
But at
they
least the
weren't
White
after
Walker.
They're stolen. They're the gold that they stole from dead Jews.
Oh man. But at least seriously though, like you got to admit, at least it sounds more like White Walker than The Walking Dead. Come on. They're blue, slowly
Blue
trudging, blue eyes. Come on.
How long is this going to take before you remember that I didn't watch the Game of Thrones?
It's I know you've seen the White Walker.
I know
though.
of the White Walkers, but
I know.
this sounds more like a zombie than a White Walker, because as far as I understand, the White Walkers are actually sentient, coherent, and plotting to try to invade. I don't know, what is it, like R.R. Martin's version of Middle Earth or some shit like that?
No, it's only in the true sense that you have seen.
He said,
only in the true. All right, don't make me get Jen back on. Only in the true sense of the fact that they weren't sentient without their leader. That's all. So anyway, move on to your horror story for the White Walker.
So basically, these were like living corpses, because you're cold, so your bodily functions are slowly shutting down. You probably haven't eaten properly. This is the 1850s, so there was probably a little bit of the scurvy going on. Essentially, one witness described them as, they're not Inuit, they're not even human. And they actually applied an article, and I kind of went through it, and it was really interesting because they were talking about, the fact that they would see these disoriented figures, and they would describe them, like their skin was cold and went to the touch, and they had never seen, devils or spirits or really other peoples. So in Inuit oral history, they very much they talked about these essentially walking dead men, and it was really interesting to kind of follow through, because could you imagine, you've never seen people, you live in an area where coming across people never happens, and then all of a sudden you've got like these zombie people who, even if they are coherent, they don't speak your language, and you sure as shit don't speak theirs. So your first instinct, of course, is going to be to jump to whatever explanation you can come up with, and that's like, oh, we're dealing with the zombies.
Yeah, I think that's hilarious, actually. And think about it. What does it explain? It explains a lot of some of the weird phenomena that people saw back in the day. That's a perfect example, right?
Yeah. So after the Arctic zombies, the next up we have is the ghost soldier. Now, I thought this one was just a little bit more interesting, just because they talked about how this phenomena actually kind of happened a lot more, and they talked about other real phenomena that we see now. So this talks about Canadian soldier Will Bird. He is one of the more celebrated memoirists, aka people who were there and actually wrote about what they saw during the First World War. A lot of veterans cite his work as one of the most realistic portrayals of what happened in trench warfare. So Bird believed that he fought the First World War in the constant company of ghosts. So there was his brother Stephen, who had been killed on the Western Front in 1915, and Bird wrote that he had decided to enlist after his brother had appeared to him as a specter at his Saskatchewan farm in full uniform. Then
I can see that as a horror movie. I can see that as a horror movie.
Oh, yeah, Ghost told me to go to war.
Probably been done before.
But there was a very interesting event that happened to him. Essentially, he was serving in France in 1917, and he reported being shaken awake by his brother's ghost. Now, his brother told him to get his gear, and then led him on a little bit of a walk through the trench. The next morning, Bird had discovered that where he had been sleeping had actually been shattered by an explosive shell, and he after this incident, he always gave credit to his survival of that incident to his dead brother, essentially. Now, a historian, Tim Cook, found that this was actually not a unique experience. There were several soldiers who had returned from the Western Front with the belief that they had survived time as, I guess, an ethereal, I don't know, ethereal land of the dead. Thanks, Tony. Basically, and that's something that I think kind of makes sense that, when you're almost dealing with like shell shock as it's happening. So your mind is trying to explain a situation that defies your entire sense of rationality. And of course you have to kill other human beings and all of that. So it just kind of compounds. And, again, back then they of course didn't understand the universe as we do now. So it does make sense that, people would see ghosts and would believe that they had been guided by ghosts.
So I have a question. So
Sure.
He was on the battlefield when that happened?
Yeah. He says his brother woke him up and basically told him to get his shit and get out of there.
So even though it could have easily been another...
Could have been another person, could have just been a hallucination, a dream, all of that type of stuff.
Well, how about one more? And I say one more only because you don't get to steal all the thunder. Boyce and I also like horror stories, and Hank Hill and I would like to be able to pick our own favorite ghost story this week. Because remember, I think it was, I don't know, was it 2 years ago? I think it was 2 years ago. Hannah and I had you and Jen on from your older podcast, and we went through horror ghost stories, if I remember right. We all picked different ones that we liked. Oh wait, no, that was sex stories.
No, it was erotica.
Yep. Damn it, that's right. Okay, sorry. Oh, sorry. Anyway, okay. We're not going to do that. We'll stick with the ghost stories, I think, tonight.
So the one that I've decided to end with here, this is something that I never knew that I wanted to know, but as soon as I knew it, I knew that I needed to know it. So this is a seascape of corpses. So back in the early 1900s, there's this little boat that kind of sank off the coast of Newfoundland, I believe it was. I think you might have heard of it. I think somebody made a small movie about it, just kind of, like this little thing didn't get a lot of attention. The boat was called the Titanic. There were 2,200 people on it, and 1,500 of them died. Well, what happened to those bodies? To the people who couldn't get off the boat, because as we saw in the movie, it was really only women and children who were pulled off of boats, plus the staff. Well, could you imagine having to see 1,500 bodies floating in the ocean? Because Canadians had to clean that up. So 4 ships ended up being chartered out of Halifax to recover these 1,500 victims, essentially. So crew members, they had to spend days living and working in a, very lonely patch of the North Atlantic. And the only people around them other than their crazy crewmates were the dead bodies, the fields of open-mouthed, life-jacketed corpses. You'd start picking up bodies at 6 a.m. and work until about 5:30 p.m. And that was according to the diary of crew member McKay Bennett, or of the McKay Bennett, a ship that handled more than 300 of the bodies. Yeah, just sit and think about that horror story.
No, that sounds like normal Canadian life to me.
Frozen bodies? No, we're not going up the Himalayas and finding dead bodies as we go. No.
Yeah, that would be crazy.
Up on our shores.
I don't have to get her though, right?
Oh, they were just giving her.
Oh, all the dead bodies. That's what they were doing. So. Anyway.
They did it for the gram.
Oh, my. Boyce, do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
You go ahead, man. That's funny.
All right. So my favorite one in this article here, my favorite one is the hooded figure.
Oh, that was on my list.
Yeah. And I only like it just because it's called the hooded figurine, and it reminds me of kind of like The Ring, where the girl comes out and you can't see her eyes with the hair and stuff like that. This reminds me of a different version of that. So it reads, as they dug into the foundation of an ancient Proto-Inuit house on Baffin Island, archaeologists Greg and Deborah Sabo.
George.
Oh, George, what did I say, Greg? Oh, sorry. Why did I say Greg? I don't know why. Anyway, they were turning up the unusual artifacts, bones, a baleen, harpoon heads, bits of wood, and then they unearthed something downright eerie. It was a faceless man in a hooded robe with a simple cross emblazoned on his chest.
Dun, dun, dun.
To any modern Westerner, the figure was instantaneously recognizable as a member of the Roman Catholic clergy, But to Nordic, and I don't know if I should butcher
Nomadic
Thule people. Is that how you say that?
Sure.
All right, people living at the time of the Middle Ages, it should have been a figure as an alien. It would have been a figure as alien as a Martian. So, to them, to the Sabos, I guess, the eerie figure was proof that the mythical Hel Huland mentioned in Viking sagas wasn't mythical at all. It had been in Arctic Canada all along. So what this is, to me, what this says is that the Vikings were scared of this specific, image, and it really just was something out of Canada. Is that what this is saying?
Truth be told, I'm not 100% sure exactly what went down. The whole Nordic colonization, I guess, of the Americas is something that's kind of on a perpetual to-do list of mine. But they did, there's reason to believe that they came here. There's even a site in some part of Canada that's considered evidence of an ancient, older Nordic peoples settling in North America. But essentially the figurine, it's believed to have been actually kind of like a priestly figure, because it does resemble a Catholic priest or priest from way back then, or from hundreds of years ago. So it's not so much that the Vikings were scared off or whatever, they just stopped coming back. And the doll itself was considered to be an Inuit interpretation of these visitors, because of course, again, they had no conception that there was much of a world outside of them. So they never really interacted with other peoples. So this would have just been almost like an alien to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, because they didn't understand. Yeah, they didn't understand what was going on outside of the thing. Therefore, that's how they consider it. I just didn't know Vikings or anybody looked like Catholic priests. That's all.
Yeah, that's something that I've already written down as a future topic.
Well, there we go. Boyce, did you have a favorite one?
Oh, let me pull it back up. My bad. You guys were. Oh, I know what it was. About the girl that got buried alive. I know that's what it was.
Oh.
Where'd it go? Shit. I think that's the scariest one. That one actually happened. The rest of them are bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So that scares me the most. So, okay. It says you go into any historical graveyard in Canada, and it's likely that some of the coffin's lids will feature scratch marks. Before the advent of modern medical monitoring, a few hours of unconsciousness could be all your loved ones needed to consign you to the nightmare of premature burial. There's a chilling case documented in Woodstock, Ontario in 1886. A girl named Collins was being exhumed in order to move her to another burial place where their coffin lid was removed. Exhumers gazed in horror at evidence of dreadful torture. Her shroud was torn into shreds. Her knees were drawn up to her chin. One of her arms was twisted under her head. Yikes.
Yeah. Well, I have read various accounts of, ways they would deal with this, because as it mentions here, as mentioned in other readings, I guess, is that, sometimes somebody being unresponsive and to any sort of stimulation would have been caused to presume them dead, and instead of any sort of leaving them out for a while because you don't want to deal with the smell of decay or whatever, they would just bury them. They would just end up burying them. And I think there was one possible solution that they had where they would tie a string to a bell and to the person's finger, so if they woke up, which is kind of cool, but that would just, I couldn't imagine the horror of, being unconscious, and then next thing you know, you wake up and you can't really breathe. You've got a very limited oxygen supply, so instincts are going to start kicking in, and it's just like an emotional hell.
Oh yeah, and it's a never-ending torture. Nothing you can do about it. You're stuck in a box. This ain't Kill Bill. This is real life.
Yeah, it's literally the end of your life. But yeah, that is a horrifying case. And I mean, it did happen a fair bit back before we kind of knew various vital signs to be looking for.
Yeah. But that's what scares me more than anything is actual horror. That scares the shit out of me.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Because we can all dismiss most of these little things, but not that one.
Well, I mean, picking up hundreds of dead bodies in the ocean
That's also pretty much.
it's kind of high up on my list of things that I'd rather not do.
I would prefer that.
Pragmatic.
To being buried alive, yeah, absolutely. But if I didn't have to pick either of them, then I'm definitely going with option C of none of the above.
I don't think sometimes you get that option, my friend. Not all the time.
I think usually that's kind of like secret answer. You have to look for it. You have to make sure it's in there on your own.
Well, all right. I think that I don't know. I thought that was great. Han and I used to do something like that almost every year, talk about different horror stories. This one was kind of cool because we were able to actually see, them from a different country. It's good to know that we're not the only ones that are tortured here in America.
No. We celebrate Halloween just like you. Except in Canada, there is the great tobacco from snowsuit.
Yeah.
I remember I would like dressed up as Batman and all of a sudden it snows on Halloween and you're like, well, now I have to wear a coat over my costume and I don't look as cool anymore.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Costume sucks.
Yeah. Now I look like Batman, but I'm just afraid to get cold. Ooh, I am the night, but I don't want to get chilly.
Is that a cold front?
It's very cold out here. The snow is wet.
Alfred, suit me.
Get me my puffy jacket.
I bet his thing is all heated. I don't think he has to worry about that.
The one with the ruffles.
The 1%ers.
Yeah.
The one with ruffles. I want the goose down jacket this week.
I'm trying to think of that. I know you guys have seen that Bat Dad videos, man. It's just absolutely.
Oh yeah, love those.
Jen, you've been doing squats.
Didn't he get his start on Vine?
Yeah,
back when Vine was a thing.
8-second videos. Yep.
God, I remember those.
And he just put on a Bat Dad face thingy.
Yeah. He would just put on like a plastic.
That's it.
Glasses mask thing, and then he would just shout at random members of his family.
Yep.
Well, the one I personally believe is the best is the damn Sling Blade guy that does the drive-through and talks like Carl from Sling Blade.
Oh, wow.
My favorite.
We've got a catch blade, a color Sling Blade.
Yeah.
Good old Billy Bob Thornton.
You mind square dealing with me? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see, I always did the Bat Dad thing at home too because we always had Batman masks. So we always had a Batman mask that I got to wear because my son was obsessed with Batman. And I tried doing recording the video thing, but it never really worked out very well for me because my son would just look at me and glare at me and be like, not funny. And he would walk away. Even as a little kid, he would just like walk away. He'd be like, that's not funny. Like, oh, shit, I didn't know Batman was that serious, man. Holy crap.
So admittedly, yeah, I'm a 30-year-old. I still use Snapchat. My wife and I went to the zoo. And I still have the video somewhere. And I'll post stories staying out of trouble and not touching things as I get. I'll sit there and I'll have my hands on my phone and I'll just record videos of me making jokes. And we walked up to the alpacas one day. Ugh. And I showed the sign and then I looked at it and then I went over to my wife and I was like, honey, I'll pack a lunch for you. Oh. And just the look on her face, she was just like, you need to stop now.
She's like,
but my favorite part about that particular day was we found there were the wild hogs and they were it was Discovery Channel up in that bitch, let me tell you. they were going at it. And
Oh.
I showed it, and I was like, we came to the zoo. They're making bacon. And my wife kind of chuckled because that one I thought was hilarious. And she actually thought it was too, because when that was the stage in our relationship where I was allowed to be funny. She's not here right now, so I can make those
I'll
jokes.
say you better look over your shoulder, buddy.
If I suddenly die, you know what happened. And all of a sudden, she starts laughing while I'm just making sure the video uploads everything. And she starts laughing, and I look, and she goes, "Did you not hear that?" And I look over, and there's this dad and his 3-year-old who are standing like 10, 15 feet away. And the kid looked at his dad and he goes, "Dad, they're making bacon." And I was just like, oh, no. Okay, that is not the worst thing a child has picked up for me. Okay, I can move on with my day.
Yep. Nothing to see here, folks.
Yeah,
Well,
that's fine when you.
That's about as good as. So we used to babysit my friend, and she was Catholic, right? And she's Catholic. Not like, I don't think like super religiously Catholic. Like she never went to church when we hung out, and she never invited me to church. But she was definitely Catholic, and that was before I even got into my whole atheism phase. It was just a Chris hated church thing, was exploring Wicca, all these other things. And like her daughter was, I don't know, 2 and didn't really like to talk much, between 2 and 3. Just didn't like to talk much. So what I did is I was like, all right, what can I get you to say? And I was like, fart. And she wouldn't say anything. And I was like, butt? Nothing. And I was like, poop? Nothing. And I was like, Satan? And she's like, Satan. And I was like, oh shit. Oh shit. And so she's like, her mom came home to pick her up. We were babysitting. And her mom she comes home and she's like, Satan! Satan! And she's like raising her arms in the air. And my friend, she looks at me and she goes, what the fuck is your problem? And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I think I just got to turn it close. But I was like, I'm sorry. I was like, it was a joke. I didn't think she would actually pick that word up. I was like, at least it wasn't a swear word. And she goes, in my house, it would have been better to be a swear word than that. And I was like, oh.
Wow.
I was like, all right, next week, I'm going to teach her how to say hail.
Yes. Hail Santa.
Oh, she will not let me. It's funny because she cuts my hair, still. She has 2 other kids, so obviously it's not that big of a deal. Her kid's in her teen years now. But it's just funny because I'm waiting for her kid to graduate, and I'm going to go to her open house, and I'm going to wear a Hail Satan shirt, and like I'm going to like make a big deal about it. Be like, hey, Leona, remember when you were a child? The first word you ever said was that.
Oh no.
Anyway, the things we do to our other. That should be a case why I'm not that good of a parent.
Not for other children. People's kids.
Yeah. Well, that's what probably.
No kids. I have no say.
Well, if you look at it, it's kind of, my sister always like, how many times do I ever babysit, my sister's kids or any of these other things? So sometimes I want, maybe you look back on that and go, I haven't fed them alcohol, but I teach them how to say Hail Satan and I teach them how to swear. I don't know what.
Worst things have happened.
Ugh. Anyway. So for the last part of the discussion tonight, and I hate to bring everybody back, but I think it would be a good discussion because this is a local brewery, and Michigan. What is one of the big things Michigan's known for? Right, it's local breweries. It's a big thing in our lives, right? Michigan, Grand Rapids specifically is like the beer city capital of Michigan, and I believe they tried to contend for the beer city capital of the United States for a while. No idea if they ever got it, because I don't drink beer, and I don't care that much. But I can tell you, Founders has always been a staple, even going back to, when I first started going to bars, because the original Founders, way back in the day, before they had a big brewery when they were small, they used to have a lot of indie concerts there. And I had a friend that used to play in a Doors cover band, and they would always play there. And I had another friend that had a band that was like a cross between the Doors, the Beatles, and Led Zeppelin, and they would always play there. And so I hated beer, and they didn't have liquor at the time or any of those other stuff, but I used to always go there because they had really good music. And you bring a flask with you and deal with what you got to do. But Founders was always a big staple in the community that we were in Grand Rapids. So one of the big things that has come out recently is there is a lawsuit right now by an employee that was fired for what he's claiming is racial discrimination. So have either of you heard about this at all by any chance?
I definitely.
Well, you started talking about it a little while ago. Does that count?
No, that doesn't count.
Damn. Then I'm going to say, other than the articles that you shared with us, no, I haven't really heard a whole lot about it.
How about you, boys?
This was a couple months ago, though, right?
Yes. Yeah, this has been going on for a while.
Yeah, I definitely heard of it before because, I like beer and I like Grand Rapids. So I definitely saw the articles. That's for sure. And it's sad because I really do like Founders.
Yeah. And the funniest thing about the whole thing, right, is that, they've made a huge name for themselves. They sold a lot of beer. They have a lot of specialty type things. I mean, they have like, what do they have? This like Canadian breakfast stout, which is like, I don't know, it's called like QBD or something like that. Or CBD. Yeah. I don't remember what it is.
Maple syrup in their beer.
Yeah. It's really good. Maple syrup and bacon.
It's like a Canadian beer. I don't know. It's like if you went to Canada, this is a typical beer you'd be drinking. But it sells for like $30 for one of these bottles. Like, it's insanely priced. Like, I bought one for a friend of mine for Christmas last year. I was like, I hope you really like this because a bottle of scotch is only $10 more than this, and it tastes 5 times better and gets you a lot more. But
gets you a lot more drunker.
Yeah. But anyway, long story short, Founders has been a staple in the Grand Rapids community for many, 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 many years. And they've kind of branched out, obviously, to other parts of Michigan. And there was an employee named Evan, right? And his story essentially is he filed a lawsuit last year, actually. He started the lawsuit against the brewery, claiming that they fired him based on his profile. So essentially, he was fired because he's black. And I'll be honest, that for me, that was a big surprise because Founders was never a brewery that I saw as one that was, something that got noticed for that, right?
Yeah.
Grand Rapids is a pretty inclusive community. They aren't a community that goes out of their way to make people feel uninclusive. A lot of us have been connected through different political circles to try and push a more progressive agenda together, to push legalization, decriminalization of marijuana, to push for the stopping, imprisoning nonviolent crimes, all those types of things. A lot of us have all worked together to do those different things. And it's weird that all of a sudden Founders is being accused of this because they've always kind of been on the forefront from, the image that they portrayed of, racial equality. And hearing about this makes me, take a second guess at some of the different things going on. But essentially, the gentleman, he said a couple of different things. He said that his manager picked him out because of his skin color, that his manager had, and this is the Detroit brand, but his manager had a printer labeled whites only, and they allowed other employees to use the N-word around him. And when he asked them if they could make this stop, they basically dismissed him.
Not a good look.
No, that is definitely not a great look.
Not a good look.
Yeah. And the funny thing is the founders of Founders, ironically enough, they came out and actually basically said that they hired a PR firm last year to deal with all of this, and they hired, they said that that this was not a big issue, and they've denied things, which is like very, this falls into this campaign of saying, hey, what happened to honesty above all else, right? Where is the honesty here, folks? Like, why are we, if these issues happen, let's admit to them, correct them, and fix the mistake. And the manager that was part of this whole thing was still employed. They hadn't even been let go at that point yet.
Shocking. A company not wanting to make itself look better by distancing itself from any sort of racist bullshit going on in its stores? I'm shocked that would ever happen.
I don't know why you're that shocked. I'll be honest though, it was a little shocking to me, that they hadn't fired the guy yet. I mean, and when we look at what happened with American Atheists, and I know David Silverman will deny all this, but I mean, they took pretty quick action based on his accusations against him, right? And here we are. This is for racial things, and this is just a public company. But you would think that they would fix this, and they offer sensitivity training and all these other things to help get rid of diversity in their workplace. And it's like, well, dude, you can't get rid of diversity. You need to have inclusion training. You need to have all sorts of gender identity training and all these other things. And the funny thing is recently, just as of last week, the PR firm, the lady that they hired to help with this, quit. She quit. She said, enough's enough.
Yeah, she had kind of said that she felt like they weren't listening to her, right? Like, basically, crap. Yeah, she blasted the leadership for prioritizing winning a lawsuit over the well-being of its employees.
Yeah, that's not a good look either.
No, it's not, especially when the person you hire to make yourself look good in that particular vein is saying, "Yeah, I'm gonna leave because you guys aren't looking good, and you're not making yourselves look good, and you're making my job a lot more difficult than it needs to be."
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean,
it's
for me,
like the president's lawyer.
Yeah.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, you just all of a sudden you said for me and then you stopped. So we were like, oh.
No, I'm sorry. I thought I cut you off.
No. So what is it for you?
For me, the weird thing is again, like I said, I mean, I don't think it's weird that I know people that are racist, and I don't think it's weird to know a business that seems, very inclusive to be non-inclusive. But what's the weirder thing is that there's not more employees standing up against this. And like I have friends online that work at Founders, right? I have friends that work at Founders still, right? And the weird thing is that some of them are stepping up and saying, no, this account's completely wrong. This guy was okay with, some of the things going on, and he would never do this. And it's like, he's in the lawsuit. He's suing them. Like, it's not like some lawyer walked up to him and said, hey, I want to make a bunch of money off you. Will you do this so I can make money? That's not what's happening here. The guy wouldn't have filed a lawsuit unless he actually felt discriminated against. Nobody does that. And it's inconceivable to me how anybody wants to defend Founders. And it goes back to, why are we defending the people we should not be defending? And I'm sure there's a word for it, but it's just like in the atheist movement, it's the David Silverman. People want to continue to defend David Silverman. Fuck him over and over again. And I'm sorry, he did some shitty things. Let's admit to it. Let's understand the shitty things he did. And let's say, hey, let's hire better people that don't do shitty things. Seems very simple to me.
I'm sorry, my cat just skitzed out and attacked the hell out of my hand.
Oh.
He's fine. He's having a spaz attack. He's not even 2, so he's still very. But you're right, Chris. When it came to David Silverman and what happened with him, there was quick, decisive action that happened. None of this whole waffling, because it's more a greater concern about the profit than the ethics and the morality behind it. And I think we're seeing kind of a point where in society we're kind of having to determine, is the whole focusing on the economics of a thing more valuable than the integrity?
And they had a good name. And that's what I'm curious about is the employees. Like, what are they saying? Because, okay, so they're saying racial slurs in front of him. Well, and they're like, oh, well, he was okay with it. It doesn't make it okay, though.
Right.
It's a terrible position.
Just because one person belongs to a particular group does not mean they speak for that entire group. Like,
right.
It's kind of like that South Park episode where Randy says the N-word, and he goes, then they can't understand why Token's upset about it. His kid is Stan? Yeah, his kid's Stan. And Stan's like, but Al Sharpton told my dad it was cool. oh, well, Al Sharpton's the king of black people. Well, that's what he told my dad, right? It's just because one specific figure in that group says it's okay doesn't make it on the whole okay, right? Like, it's why Justin Trudeau got in trouble for the whole brown face thing.
Exactly.
Even if someone did say it's okay, it still doesn't make it a word at work.
Exactly.
No matter what people say, no matter if every single person that worked there said it's okay, it's a public business. Have some class, you dumbasses, in my eyes.
Yeah. Well, and I ran into that at my job. I mean, there was this younger kid, and he told me, he's like, oh, he said, you're my N-word. And I was like, okay, thanks. He's like, oh, you're not going to say it back? And I was like, no. He's like, well, I don't care if you do. And I said, well, I don't feel comfortable doing it. And I don't think that is something that I want to partake in. Like, to me, I said, I think of you as a human. And if you think that's an endearing word, then you're welcome to your opinion. But in my world, I'm not going to participate in that. And I know your name, and I have a nickname for you, and it has nothing to do with your race, So, like, I'll call you that instead. And, I said, if it offends you, I'm sorry, but I feel that it's inappropriate to use, words that were, meant to be derivative against, people of color. And I'm not going to do that. So, sorry, and, after that, he left me alone about it. But still, it's just that mentality of, like, even if somebody tells you, you're right, you just don't accept it. And it kind of gets into, then you get back to, and as we close this out, it gets back to one big thing.
You might have a woman friend who makes jokes.
Uh-oh.
Oh, hello.
Makes jokes about what?
Yeah. Oh, there you are. Just because, you have that one particular woman friend who makes jokes about women in the kitchen making sandwiches or whatever doesn't actually mean that that's, okay for a guy to be making a lot of those jokes. I mean, those jokes in general are rather tasteless and unfunny to begin with. However, there's a specific reason why those jokes are considered socially tasteless. There is a reason why social contract says, maybe don't do that out of respect for the fact that, women have more to offer society than, being baby factories or pleasing their husbands. And to boil it down to and say, well, we should be allowed to do it because this particular person says it's okay, and anybody who disagrees with them because they agree with me is the problem, not me. And it's just distancing yourself from the problem and shutting down a conversation instead of being willing to sit and listen and go, oh, okay, well, I didn't understand why that might be wrong, why that could be hurtful, right?
Exactly. So as we wrap this up, and I agree with every point here, and as we wrap this,
someone else say this pretty well.
Go ahead.
You're just chopped up there pretty bad. Your reception's not great. But yeah, I just saw this guy doing a public speaking engagement for Vox, and there is some African American students at a college asking, do you think it's okay to say the N-word to each other? And he goes, no, it's not about do I think it's okay, it's what is your intentions and what makes you want to say it. He goes, if I'm around a bunch of my friends that are all black, he goes, and we say that, that's one thing, but why do you want to say it? If you're a white guy, why do you want to say it? And then he goes, that's people that are friends. That's a very personal relationship, that kind of language.
Exactly.
Do I want to? Absolutely not. Why would I? So it kind of really explained the idea of using the racial slurs. Why do you want to do it? Why are you looking for the approval to do it?
I like that take. Why do you, as the person on the other side of the fence, want to be a part of that? Why do you want to use that? Why do you need to do that?
Why? Oh boy.
So Tanner, why do you want to use the N-word all the time?
I obviously don't, so it's not been part of my vocabulary for a long time.
I wish I could find that video. It's a really good video, though.
Yeah. Well, if you do, I'll tell you what, you're welcome to share it with me. We'll post it on the Facebook page. We'll put it up for Patreons, whatever we got to do. So as we wrap the show up, again, I don't know. I really think that this is not a nuanced discussion any longer. I really think that we're at this point where we have to start understanding where people are at, what they're doing, and stop buying into this, well, if he says it's okay for me to say it, I'm going to say it type culture. We got to get away from that. And you're right. I mean, Boyce's big thing is why would we want to say that? Well, I don't. And it's kind of the same thing. If you go back to this article, and as we're all running back to this article, the article is essentially the guy in the deposition is saying, well, I don't know. I didn't know he was black. And it's like, how do you not know if somebody's black or not? Well, I don't know what his DNA is. And it's like, come on, man. At some point here, we got to grow up. We got to understand where we're at. And we got to make sure that we don't fall into this trap where we're now going to be using these as excuses to, be racially biased or discriminatory. We just can't do that. And so, I don't know. I'm at the point where, for me, the big thing is that if people don't want to get past this and don't actually want to grow up, is what I'm going to call it, then you know what? Fuck you. And I'll just say, fuck you, buddy. And, you're what is the problem here in this nation. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining us for another Cellar Door Skeptics. We apologize for some of the audio issues tonight. Hotel internet sucks ass, obviously, so, and not in a good way, I guess. Anyway, thank you all for joining us for another Cellar Door Skeptics. Hopefully next week or the week after, Hannah will be back joined with us to have another amazing reunion episode where we can make fun of him and pick on him for moving to the ass crack of the United States, Ohio. Thank you all, and have an amazing night.